So much is going on. We've only got him for about 20 minutes or so. Congressman Ron Paul, I don't know how he does it. Legislation, lobbying on the floor, doing 10, 15 media events a day, writing books, running Campaign for Liberty, supporting Rand Paul with the incredible realignment we're seeing politically, but he does it, and God bless him. He's Congressman Ron Paul. I want to talk about Iran, North Korea, the economy, the border situation. I want to talk about so many issues with Ron Paul, but a congressman from Texas joining us today. Congressman, first off, the political realignment. Every incumbent, whether it's Specter, a Democrat, or whether it's a Republican for the first time in 20 years winning in Hawaii, for the Congress, to your son, Rand Paul, with a 30-point defeat of the establishment Republican. Have you ever seen a realignment like this? Because generally it's one political party or the other that is seeing massive losses. But what I'm seeing is across the board, incumbents and establishment candidates are being annihilated.
No, I think that's absolutely right. This is different. I think there's been periods of time when people get very frustrated, like you indicate. They might shift back and forth from one party to the other. But right now, they're unhappy with both parties. But the real tragedy is that we don't have a good, and I say this word cautiously, a democratic process, the democratic election, the ability of parties to compete. There's a monopoly controlled by the Republicans and the Democrats. And since philosophically they're not too far apart, they sort of gang up on anybody who wants to offer an alternative. So if we had had a very strong third party, so here all people talk about the Tea Party as if it's a party, but it really isn't a party, it's an alternative. And that's why the mixture comes up, because sometimes Democrats are in trouble, sometimes Republicans are in trouble, but there's no one party to fulfill the role that is necessary. And I don't think that's going to happen soon, because the laws make it very difficult to get on ballots, and the media doesn't allow people to get into the debates and this sort of thing. So they're very, very handicapped. And I just think that we're going to see this messy situation. But I think it's just great that people are unhappy. They're very active. They want changes, and they're picking and choosing, and they're sending a loud message. And both parties are getting a little bit upset. I mean, Republicans, in one sense, they say, well, these Tea Party people, they're a little bit nuts. We can't deal with them. But then when they find out the Tea Party is a political force, they say, oh, I guess we better deal with them. So they're in a dilemma, too. But I think it'll work out as long as the people who are unhappy stick to their guns and say, and trying to agree on some basic principles. We either have too much government or too little government. We either spend too much money or too little bit of spend the money. We either have a lousy foreign policy or we don't have it. So I think those are the kind of things that we have to stick to our guns and be as consistent as possible, and to see what we can do to contribute to a positive change in this country.
There's no doubt, Congressman, I want to get your breakdown on this, that the establishment is scared, though, and they're going to pull out all the stops to try to demonize any type of true grassroots constitutionalist candidate. I mean, we're seeing them say, if you're against the health care bill, you must be a racist. But I think they've overplayed their hand by running around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Yeah, and that's been around, but it's around right now a whole lot because the Tea Party movement is so much bigger. But I can remember in 1996, and I don't know exactly what you were doing in 96, but when I was trying to get back into Congress, both Republicans and Democrats said, well, this guy's crazy. He's even critical of the federal war on drugs. Anybody that's critical on the war on drugs must mean he wants to give drugs to kids. That sort of thing. So they tried real hard to demonize me then. But I came back with honest answers, said that, no, the war on drugs doesn't work. I don't want to use drugs. I don't want to use drugs on my kids. I take care of women delivering babies. To emphasize the evil and the harm of drugs. We won that argument. So they will always try to demonize individuals, but more so today than ever before, because, like you say, they were trying to turn it around. That just because we oppose something Obama proposes, oh, you must be a racist. It's the demagogues that really bugged me.
But, in 96, I was interviewing you when you were getting back into office, and I do remember that, and they a few years ago had your head floating around out in space, always trying to make you look like the outsider. But as many newspapers have reported, your views, the Constitution, my views, are now the majority view, and the establishment is desperate and is very, very afraid. What else do you see them from your years of research and experiencing this in Congress? What else do you think the big central banks and others are going to do to try to keep control of the people?
Well, I think whatever they think is necessary, and I had some information passed on to me, sort of inside information of somebody who knew somebody that was well tuned to the people at the Federal Reserve, and they say they are really, really concerned about our movement to expose the Fed for what they're doing. Not so much that they think tomorrow we're going to have a victory and have a thorough audit and the Fed is going to end, but what they're upset or worried about is the fact that more and more people are aware of the Federal Reserve now like never before, and exposure is the most important thing. Then the changes will come and the reforms will come. So they know exactly what we've been talking about. I think that's where we've had such a tremendous success in the freedom movement in the last decade or so, is that people have become aware of the power of the Federal Reserve. And well, I'm so delighted when I go to the universities, and the next generation will know about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was something you never even learned about in college. I mean, they just fluffed over this. It wasn't important. They took care of us. They knew how to run the economy. That has ended, and I think even those who defend the Fed are very frightened about it.
Did you have a chance to see Zbigniew Brzezinski's speech to the CFR last week? Because he said, for the first time in world history, the planet is awake to us and our move for global government. And he basically said, we are in trouble.
I didn't see that, but I hope he has some real reasons to be worried about that. But was it Biden that said something the other day that Brussels should be the capital for the free world or something like that?
Yeah, they're really coming out in the open with their world government because we've exposed it. And I want to run rapid fire now through a bunch of different issues while we have you. We're very honored to have Congressman Ron Paul with us today live on the 26th day of May 2010. You mentioned the war on drugs. I saw an interview with you back in the late 1980s. And you were talking about the CIA who'd been caught shipping in heroin then. And a few months ago, you gave a speech and said there's been a CIA coup in America. Since then, it's been in the New York Times, the Washington Post, AFP, French news agency, and even Geraldo Rivera on Fox. They go, yes, our troops are helping grow the opium for the farmers, because if they don't, Al-Qaeda will get it and sell it. What an amazing move to go from denying that they're producing it and shipping a lot of it in to saying, oh, yes, we have to, or Al-Qaeda would get it. Well, if you just decriminalized it, that would take the money out, and then Al-Qaeda, as they call it, wouldn't. I mean, that was the excuse on the crack cocaine. Well, we've got to ship the cocaine in, or the communist, will get the money. Can you speak to that, sir?
Well, I don't have the absolute proof of it, but my suspicion is, and just because of the stories you hear, I think they really want drugs to be illegal, because I think that's the way they raise money for their governments that's off the books. They own banks. They can get involved in enterprise, and they have to get their cash, and it never comes through. Well, not all of it. Some of it will come through appropriations and legally, even though we don't know where it goes and who controls it. But they even need even more money because they're doing so much. There's so much activity going on. So in many ways, they are very, very powerful, and it is in their interest to keep the drug war going. So it's a bit of an irony that some very, very sincere church-believing people who want to take care of the kids believe that, we have to keep this war going. At the same time, they're inadvertently allies with the drug dealers who want the drugs to be kept illegal. And then you point out, well, that the government and the CIA is involved as well.
Well, Congressman, I know you're super busy and none of us can be on top of everything, but would you like us to send you a packet of mainstream news where they just calmly admit that, okay, our troops, they had Geraldo Rivera with a Marine Corps commander with the troops explaining why they helped the farmers grow the opium. They're now basically bringing this out and hiding it in plain view.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some of that, but I can always look at more material when it's available.
Well, here's one more issue on that subject. Did you see the Washington Post 2 days ago? CIA units, wacky idea, depicts Saddam as gay. And then in the article, it quotes them as admitting that the CIA put out at least one fake Osama bin Laden video. That sounds like that should be a congressional investigation.
Yeah, well, there's so many things that should be congressional investigations that sometimes, though, it becomes difficult if you hear of a real problem. I think, well, I guess I ought to report this. Where should I go? The FBI and the CIA, and they'll investigate it for me? Well, who's going to investigate the investigators? And that's our job, and that's what our responsibility is, to hopefully wake up enough people to find out who to believe and who not to believe.